Good day. I am pre-recording this lecture showcasing our second edition for the textbook Ethics Foundations of Moral Valuation, precisely because of a sudden change in the schedules and an earlier commitment from my end. I hope that despite so, I would still be able to uh, clarify at least uh, everybody's concern about this textbook, considering also the fact that this is one of the courses that was recommended um, to be removed from general education. So, this is the 2025 Higher Education Roadshow, where we hope to rethink assessment, engagement, and practices in higher education. We are still pushing forward ethics. This is the copy of the first edition. The second edition must be accessible already to everyone at this point, but barely in the title page, we have changed the title page, but the names of the authors are still the same. So this book is still written by Dr. John Bulaong, yours truly, Dr. Albert Lagdiva, Mr. Michael Ner Mariano, and Dr. Jade Principe. So, what can we say about teaching ethics? So, sometimes when you teach this course, we need to be able to clarify how you teach ethics. Many things that Many thinks that ethics as a GE is actually focused only on teaching professional ethics. Not so. That's why we need to clarify. Are you currently teaching ethics in your university? Or have you taught ethics before? And for those who have taught it, what are most probably your most significant experiences teaching ethics? There is, of course, a tradition that basically teaches ethics only in terms of memory work. And that's something we want to rectify or correct in our textbook. That's why, for those who already taught it, we need to constantly reflect how else can we teach it. And for those who anticipate teaching ethics, how do we envision teaching this course? These are questions that are very interesting to ponder or reflect on as we continuously look into how we can teach ethics. Ethics, as we know it, is actually operational on the basis of the CHED description of what ethics as a course is. And in that description, they basically said there are three major systems of ethics to consider. One is the virtue ethics of Aristotle. Second is the deontology of Kant. And third is Mill's Bentham or Mill's utilitarianism. However, the CMO also opened the possibility of the inclusion of natural law ethics or the ethics that is based on natural law. So when we start talking about virtue ethics or Aristotle, we're talking about character, the person. This, of course, investigates how character, personhood, habits affects decision making. How is my perception of the world affecting also or can affect, whether you like it or not, my decision? Second, the ontology considers intrinsic, no, internal rightness or wrongness, duty of an action, ought. No, when you ask what ought I to do or ought not to do, that points to the ontological ethics, whether you like it or not. And lastly, consequentialism. This is, of course, utilitarianism, which, if the first one, the ontology, if the previous one, the ontology considers motivation, the intent, why the person did it, The utilitarianism considers the morality, the goodness or rightness or wrongness of an action depending on its consequences or its results. But of course, we can also add, no, because we grow up, or we are from a very predominantly Christian or Catholic or even religious context, the concept of a natural law. And when we start looking at natural law, the principles to consider are the unchanging principles: do good, avoid evil. That's a primary principle, in fact. And also, at the same time, the consideration of human actions. No, what is a human act, and why is the human act very important? Of course, these three plus one um, points us to different approaches. No, the other one is a character approach to the good life. The other one is a very principled theory approach to the good life. No, you have to understand, for example, that the ontology was the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There's a very principled approach, or the common good approach is utilitarianism. In fact, the common good utilitarianism technically operates in the greatest happiness principle, no? The happiness of the greater number of people. And natural law basically is a type of law that operates on reason, but also operates on deity, no? God, for example, or what God wills. So let's look at this one, these four, little by little, and hopefully we can clarify, how how you, dear teacher, can basically engage the text. It's quite interesting that though we spoke about it in terms of character, um, the ontology, utilitarianism, and natural law, our textbooks doesn't is not organized this way. No? In fact, our textbooks begins with that which is very close to us. No, it begins almost immediately with utilitarianism, and after utilitarianism, we go to the ontology, and after the ontology, natural law, and then ethics. No, there is a very unique way our textbooks are organized, and that is beginning from common sensibility, from our connect on the basis of our context. And it's quite easy to engage students from where they are. And whether you like it or not, the utilitarian perspective is the closest to us. No, the for example, the cost benefit analysis. No, so we evaluate a particular something on the basis of its benefits, cost benefit. That's why this is a very, very capitalist perspective. I understand, but it's a capitalist perspective also worth considering, no? Also worth reading, also worth reflecting on, because sometimes we make decisions on the basis of its cost and the degree of benefits we will receive. Like, why will you even push forward buying this textbook if by doing so you suffer more? That's something you will not do, no, by principle. Or the ontology, right? What is the principle to this one? What is this? The ontology, right? So there is a reason why the textbooks was arranged that way. Nevertheless, we will discuss it following these guidelines, looking at virtue ethics first, no? So virtue ethics, no? Virtue ethics is one of the oldest perspectives about the good life, and it's a perspective of the good life that is based on habit, character, di ba? What you repeat, what you constantly do, you become, no? And this character understanding is the one that defined ethics for quite a long time. No, it tried to portray for us, for example, that being a good person is a matter of habit. One of the key proponents of this school, Aristotle, basically says one sparrow does not make a spring. And it's a direct quote from the Nicomachean Ethics, where he basically says, it's not because you did a good action once, you become a good person. And it's not because you did a bad action once, you become a bad person. But it's habit that makes you a good person or that makes you a bad person. No? And that's interesting because here it's not even exact. It's not even an exact, very exact field yet. What Aristotle is saying is that there's a constant attempt to hit the mark. There's a constant attempt to identify the mark, and that's also very important that we know the mark. No, and historically, as I said, we read this one from ancient philosophical systems like Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism. But in our understanding of ethics, this is clearly articulated by Aristotle. And when we start looking at virtue ethics, the first thing you consider is, do you want to be happy? No? Pag, if you ask your students, do you want to be happy? Everybody would say, yes, we want to be happy. Nobody would say they don't want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. But Aristotle also clearly says, but even if we all wanted to be happy, not everybody wanted to be happy in the same way. And that's the reason why we need to be able to see what is the happiness that brings us to our end, telos, purpose, television, far vision, telescope, far scope. Therefore, that which leads us to our purpose, that leads us to the completion of ourselves, eudaimonia, no, good, no, like eulogy, eulogos, di ba? Pag if somebody dies, they give a eulogy, and eulogos means good words. No? Eu is good, daimon spirit, eudaimonia is the feeling that you sense or experience when in the presence of this good spirit. And therefore, happiness as we know it. Of course, it's very far from contemporary notions of happiness where we are always on the party, but at least it's a state that is a consequence of repetitive action. But aside from telos, of course, we need to take into consideration ergon. No? That this state, this condition, this habituation, is a consequence of reason. Remember, for Aristotle, no, it's not just a matter of wanting something. It's also wanting something appropriate or wanting something proper to humanity. No? Proper to humanity. That's also something we need to pay attention to. Is this proper to humanity? Something I can live with, something I can go with, something appropriate for me, no? And this proper to humanity, whether you like it or not, is something we need to take into consideration. No? Because according to Aristotle, if humanity is to be, if something is to happen, if humanity is to be happy, this happiness has something to do with who we are. And this happiness is therefore something that is embedded like a blueprint into who we are, no? And that's the reason why Aristotle would say we need to take into consideration the soul. No? Soul, for Aristotle, you need to understand the soul is not a Christian soul. No? The soul is anything that moves. That's the anima, that which animates, makes movement, if you will. No? And that's the reason why he creates a distinction between nutritive soul, no, the movement of my blood caused by the pumping of my heart, nutritive soul, my eating, the blinking of my eyes, my reflexes, still movement, still representative of soul, but very nutritive. One that I share with plants, for example, whose stromata also opens at night, for example, no? Or whose phloem and xylem still facilitate the exchange of water. Irrational. But aside from the nutritive, he also speaks of the appetitive soul. And the appetitive soul also takes into consideration that which I share with animals. Emotions, anger, dogs get angry, lust, desire, mobility. And these I share with animals. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, in the Nicomachean Ethics, for the nutritive soul, he will speak of um, for the nutritive soul, he will speak of nutrition and growth. No? So if your soul dream is to become muscled, for example, or your soul dream is to simply eat, uh, even plants can do that. Or the other one, if your dream is travel or sex, even animals can do that. They migrate, they do sex almost every anywhere. But according to Aristotle, if we are to be happy, it has to be something unique to our humanity. And eventually recognizes that that which is unique to our humanity is actually our rational faculties, our capacity for reason. But the unique contribution of Aristotle in discussing the rational faculty is in fact based on the fact that knowing and doing are two different things. No? He creates a distinction between knowing and doing. It is different, he says, that I know something, and it is different that I am doing something. No? Iba yung alam ko. Halimbawa, kaya kong magbasa ng libro tungkol sa pagkuha ng litrato, pero hindi nangangahulugan na marunong akong kumuha ng litrato. Magkaiba yon. And this is quite different from Plato. Plato himself will start saying that to know is to do. But Aristotle sees the distinction. That's the reason why for Aristotle, and I'm now on the third point, there is a very huge distinction between intellectual and moral virtue. I can basically know Sophia, wisdom, but that doesn't make me a good person. For Aristotle, what makes a good person is a moral, the existence of a moral virtue. And when we start looking at the moral virtue, this is something that has something to do with what we call phronesis. No? For those who have studied leadership, for example, there's such a thing right now as phronetic leadership. Ganun, may konsepto ng phronetic leadership. And that's also something we would like to pay attention or look at, the concept of a phronetic leadership. What does it mean to have a phronetic leadership? But phronesis is basically the person's ability to basically aim at what you read here as mesotes. Uh, Actually, this is a very, very situational type of ethics. There are basically only two extremes, Aristotle would say, and the extreme of deficiency and the extreme of excess. And he says the good path, the best path is always in between, mesotes, the golden mean. But what we need to pay attention to is that though we speak of a golden mean, the mean that is being referred here is actually not the mathematical mean, no? It's not the mathematical mean. It's actually a moving target. And that's the reason why it's something that needs to be habituated. Because it is just moving. You cannot expect, of course, the same courage from a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old from that of a general. These are they can both display courage, but not in the same way. No, and that tells you to a certain extent it takes into consideration a lot of things. No, but what we are only sure of is that it's neither of the extremes. So doing something at the right time, to the right person, to the at the right extent, that's that's almost impossible. Uh, Almost impossible. Uh, but doesn't mean it cannot be done. Almost impossible, I said. Di ba? And that's the type of ethics that is involved here, di ba? It's a type of ethics that takes into consideration um who you are, uh what your preferences are, and what are your principles, uh values, virtues, no? We call it virtue, as you see in 3A. But that's so lalaki, no? Vir is the Latin word for men. That's why we never use vir a lot nowadays. We use the more Greek, no more nuanced, balanced term, no? Arete, no? Arete, no? And that's something we need to also reflect on. What does arete means? No, what does arete means? Excellence. How are we able to manage excellences? How are we able to understand excellences? Those are the things uh, we need to pay attention to. Okay. So that's Aristotle. Of course, there are a lot to Aristotle's ethics. I'm not even doing justice. No, I'm recording it at 11. This one at very late. It's already 11. And I have a very early engagement tomorrow. But it normally takes a month to talk about or to deepen Aristotle's understanding. There's just a lot of nuances in Aristotle. And that tells you also the reason why until now it remains to be one of the most important ethical systems in place. In fact, if you're familiar with Thomas Aquinas, aside from his natural law, his understanding of the summum bonum, actus humanum, actus homini, for example, are all indicative, um, or are all intimated by Aristotle's ethics. How I would teach the virtue ethics course? First, I'll focus on the mesotes. What does it mean to aim at the balance? Why this balance is not a fixed balance? But fixed, not fixed, but not relativist. There's a very huge distinction between the two. For Aristotle, specific contexts demand a mesotes, a fixed mesotes. But so that if we are in the same context, our mesotes would be the same. No? Ganon eh. Hindi siya relativist. But it takes into consideration the context a lot. That's why it's more called situation ethics than relativism. But but it's more but aside from that, it's called virtue ethics because precisely because of the excellences. What can human excellences do? No, mesotes, the determining the middle path by the in fact at the end of the book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics, he will start talking about three principles, no? And I like these three principles a lot. He speaks of mm, choose the lesser evil, di ba? Between the two extremes. The mesotes is not exactly in the middle, so it must be leaning on one of the extremes. And the evil in which the mesotes is leaning to is the lesser evil. That's why he would say always choose the lesser evil. Between two evils, choose the lesser evil. Secondly, he would say pay attention at your biases. because you have to act against, agere contra. That's the Jesuit principle. Act against. So if your tendency is always towards excess, 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 act against it, and more or less you'll hit the target. It says. And lastly, it says, be careful about beautiful and pleasurable things, because he would say on matter of pleasure or in matters of beauty, we are not fair judges, and that's true also. So misotes. Second, maybe it would be nice to employ a decision-making tool. There are a lot of decision-making, ethical decision-making that's a life world unto itself. And maybe you can consider engaging, asking your students to take into consideration decision-making tools. In our textbook, we try to provide you with very unique cases, recent cases, that can demonstrate the ethical principles that we speak of, but also at the same time allow you to apply it to multiple contexts and situations. But the decision making tool tells you a lot about the practicality of ethics. That it's not enough to know that this is good for it to be implemented. That's not how ethical principles are conducted, and therefore something to pay attention to in the long run. Okay? Let's look at natural law ethics. And in the context of the natural law ethics, of course, we're talking here about the Summa Theologica questions 90 to 95. And that's also very important. No, you have to look at what does he mean by law, and how come law follows the four causes of Aristotle. No? It's a command of reason. No, sasabihin niya, it's a command of reason, such that if it's rational, it's something you will understand. That's you will. It's some if the law is rational, you will abide by it, not because you were coerced to do it, but because you will buy it also. You will submit yourself to it because a rational creature recognizes its reason. Ganun eh. But of course, in the natural law, you have to distinguish two types of law: the eternal law, the human law, the natural law. Eternal, natural, and human law, and also the divine law. And when we start talking about natural law, we're not talking about the Ten Commandments. These are divine laws or revealed laws. When we start looking at the natural law, we're looking at the eternal law, no, the reason of God. Of course, the understanding that the everything is rational or intelligible, we've learned that from the Greeks' understanding of the cosmos. But when we start looking at the eternal law, we're basically looking at the mind of God. No, that's the bias of Thomas Aquinas. However, Thomas Aquinas also says this mind of God, we participate in. No, participatio legis in aeterna. The participation on the eternal law, and we participate in it, and the human participation on the eternal law is the natural law. Of course, from the natural law emerges human laws. That's the hierarchy, if you will, in terms of this law. While the human person's participation in the natural law allows us to comprehend the natural law, it does not allow us to fully comprehend the natural law. There's a very, very unique distinction there, because it's a participation, so we don't share it in its entirety. And that's the reason why Thomas Aquinas will still engage. Can natural law change by addition or by subtraction and things like that, which is a very long debate between and among theologians and even philosophers for that matter. I think I've been talking very fast. Uh, Even if in reality I've not spoken about this one for a very long time. I mean, since I left the Ateneo and started doing clinical work, uh, and administrative work. I've not been teaching ethics already for quite some time. So I hope you'd understand my lapses in reason as I continuously try to engage you that this course is really very interesting to teach. So how would I teach the natural law theory? Of course, the Christian story, that's the bias of Thomas Aquinas. But do not forget that the natural law does not only exist between and among Christians. No, in fact, there's a certain universality to it. And that's the reason why we need to explain the metaphysical grounding, the understanding of creature and creator, the understanding of the law as a command of reason, and why this natural law is in fact a participation in this that command of reason. So these are the important passages to consider there. It's from the Prima Secunda Partis, and as I said a while ago, questions 90 to 95, where in question, so you need to take into consideration the style of writing of Thomas Aquinas, and he begins first with the arguments, uh, and you need to see how the each and every argument is a valid argument, and then he would provide his said contra, no, the counter argument, and how he will provide his answers. Many, when they read Thomas, they do not see that this is a conversation. No? The questions are actually conversational. And therefore, what you need to pay attention is to recognize how the law is in fact how his style of presenting the Summa is in fact very conversational. Not everybody uh, understands nor appreciates this one, and it's okay. No? The important thing is to see the law. No, is obedience to the law being moral? No, in a world where everything is just due process, due process, due process. To what extent can the law be actually be considered or re-evaluated. So the essence of the law, as I said, no law, and then you have to understand it in terms of the causes, four causes of Aristotle: the material cause, efficient cause, um, formal cause, and final cause. That's why eventually you'd see that Thomas Aquinas would say in questions 90, the law is a command of reason that must be promulgated. No? Isa yon sa conditions niya. There are four conditions. One of it is promulgation. But more importantly, the various kinds of laws, as I said, the divine law, automatically we get that out because it's a consequence of divine revelation, and therefore cannot be questioned. Whereas the eternal law is a consequence of reason. Well, not the eternal law, but the natural law. It's a participation in the reason of God. But then, as I said also, this comes from a very, very Greek understanding that the cosmos is intelligible. Diba? Cosmos. Ibig sabihin, may katwiran, merong kaayusan, pwedeng intindihin. Yun ang ibig sabihin yan. So, so the various kinds of laws you're familiar with it already, and you'd see here eternal and natural, that this is the alignment there. Now do not think that the distinction between eternal and natural is something that you can forego in the study of ethics. No, you cannot. And that's basically because I think, and this is just my opinion, I'm not a Kant scholar. John Bulaong, Dr. John Bulaong is our Kant scholar. Is the one that we can confirm this one. But the role of the categorical imperative and maxims, the relationship between categorical imperative and maxims, is very much the same, I think, with the relationship between eternal law and natural law. But human law must flow from the natural law. No? Do good, avoid evil. That's a primary condition of that law, which is very broad, nothing specific even. Uh, So let's look at the ontology. And here you'd see deon, duty, obligation. And therefore, the ontology is there. No? It's originated from the 19th century. Deon, being necessary, no? Must, imperative, obligation, if you will. That's why, if your question is, what is good? That's still very medieval, if you will, very ancient, like Aristotle, because there's a concept of a good. But when you ask what ought I to do, the ought, is indicative of an obligation, duty, even. No? So when we start looking at the ontological ethics, we need to take into consideration, what is my duty? What am I duty bound? No? And of course, it's more very complicated than that, no? So it for one, you have to be able to read the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, or the Grundlegung zur Metaphysik der Sitten. It's a very, very thin book. In fact, for Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, you only need to read book 1 and book 2. Book 1 and book 2. In book 1, there you see eudaimonia, until in chapter 7 of book 1. That's where he starts talking about teleology, the purpose, the different souls, nutritive, appetitive, and rational. That's very important. But actually, if I'm not mistaken, book 8, chapter 8 of book 1, that's where he says, um, that there are certain prerequisites to being good, no? Aristotle says there are certain prerequisites to being good, like dapat good looks, good attitude, kasi kahit mabuting tao ka, kung pangit ka, hindi ka pwedeng maging mabuti o hindi ka magiging masaya. May ganun siyang concept. Very elitist even, but very down to earth and realistic also. Tama nga naman, kahit mayaman ka, kung pangit ka, lagi mo tatanungin, bakit ako pangit? Ganon. But book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics is where he speaks about his moral virtue. And there he speaks about mesotes, why it's a what it's a character. The characteristics of mesotes. He defines what virtue is there in book 2, identifies, provides Greek examples of virtue even, until chapter 9 of book 2, where he spoke about three principles for decision making. For the natural law, we actually teach as I've said, and as I have shown to you, the prima secunda secundi partis, questions 90 to 95. But in Kant, in the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, in part 1, he starts talking about duty. And then in part 2, he starts talking about part 1 and part 2 actually is what we normally give. Part 2 is where he starts talking about the imperative, the categorical imperative, and the categorical and the hypothetical imperative. So here, in when we start looking at the Kant's groundwork, Grundlegung, we will see, for example, the foundations of duty. What is a duty? Why duty is based on pure reason, no? Remember, Kant was specifically interested with what he calls synthetic a priori principles. Synthetic a priori principles. So, to a certain extent, you need to explain what's a synthetic a priori, no? And to be able to do that, you need to create a distinction between analytic and synthetic, a priori and a posteriori, no? Before and after the fact. So pure reason happens synthetic. You combine things together a priori before experience. And that the source is a morally goodwill. In fact, Kant is one that would say, on the goodwill alone is unqualifiedly good, or good without conditions. Anything, even good looks, habits, can be thwarted by an evil will. Yun ang sabi niya. But the goodwill alone is good. And something that he shares with Thomas Aquinas is the respect for the law. The law. No, there's an imperative to the law. That's why he creates also a distinction between acting from versus acting merely in accord with the moral law. In my YouTube lectures, Samut-Sari sa Simula, I commented on the groundwork. In fact, I digested the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. I think sa bagay gabi naman na. So maybe I can show to you because you can still use a lot of the videos that I already pre-recorded in my YouTube channel. Wow, YouTuber. YouTube channel. But just to show to you also some of the things that so here, for example, you only need to go to the playlist, sorry, to the playlists. And in the playlists, of course, I have a lot about research, medieval philosophy. Bakit wala? Uh, excuse me. In the playlists here, you will see, sorry, ignore the other ones. Here, Immanuel Kant's Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Moral, where I personally commented on the entire text of the groundwork, no? From what do you need to know to understand the groundwork? Does Kant have a Stoic background? And the like, continuously until the kingdom of ends, no? And so so I use a specific, very specific context, which you can also engage, no? So not just Kant, something that you can find hopeful, useful also is that this one, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and we spoke of book one and book two. I commented specifically on book one and book two here. But also, if you wanted to use Plato's Apology, I also have commented on it. But there's also a ethics, an entire ethics in the Filipino language where I tried to comment on the work of Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, Emmanuel Levinas. But I have another video of Emmanuel Levinas that's more complete than this one. Mill uh, and Rawls. No? So these are the ethical figures that I've been working on. But I also wrote on Mino, and there's just a few texts here from modern philosophy like Berkeley and Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. But I intend to do more. I've done Mino, I've done Aristotle's Metaphysics. So I'm still working on it. I still also have an Indian philosophy set there. If you find helpful, please do not hesitate to uh, subscribe and share Samut-Sari sa Simula, no? This is where I am actually storing all my recordings since I stopped teaching at the Ateneo. But when we go here, no, we can take into consideration motive, the motivation. That's why acting from versus merely in accord, no? Iba yung kumikilos ng mula sa batas na at yung kumikilos lamang ng naayon sa batas. No, malaking pagkakaiba. I can basically whether I can basically take into consideration uh I can basically take into consideration not cheating, but if my motivation for not cheating is because I'm afraid to be punished, then that I'm merely acting in accord. Parang kumikilos ako nang naayon sa kautusang walang pasubali. Pero sa totoo lang, kumikilos ako ng nais sa kautosang may pasubali, hypothetical versus categorical, no? Yung walang pasubali, categorical imperative 'yon. That's why if you're very sensitive to it, you'd even realize that for Kant, there's a very huge distinction between hypothetical imperatives, which is in the plural, versus categorical imperative, which is in the singular. Because the hypothetical imperatives originate from multiple inclinations, multiple sources, whereas the categorical imperative comes from duty alone, from the goodwill alone. Uh, Take note also that the categorical imperative is singular, but it has three phases, three different manifestations. Universality, universalizability, no? Act only on that maxim, which at the same time you can will to be a universal law, no? That's uh, almost automatic. Baka nagsasabi kayo na may notes ako. Wala akong notes. I can show to you, no? This is how I look like. Wala akong. I'm lecturing based also on my experience of having taught ethics for a very long time, but also at the same time based on experience, no? So act only on that maxim, which at the same time you can will to be a universal law. That's the universalizability, no? And take note that when you start talking about universalizability, the golden rule is not the categorical imperative. There's a very huge distinction. The golden rule, do unto others what you want others to do unto you, is a very consequentialist one. Gagawin ko lang sa'yo, gagawin ko sa'yo kasi ganito yung gusto kong pagtrato. There's a condition there. The categorical imperative does not operate on that condition. Universalizability. Second, humanity as an end in itself, treat others not only as a means but also at the same time as an end. That's the principle of humanity as an end. Here, you can talk about saying no to casual sex, why sex is a reduction of the person to an object, to a genitalia, and therefore, no casual sex because you're being utilized as an object, not as a person. No, uh, in the treat others not only as an end, but also this, not only as a means, but also at the same time as an end. You see that Kant doesn't prohibit hiring people to employing people to attain your targets, but that you hire people, not as an object. These are two different things. And then principle of autonomy versus heteronomy. Hetero, other, nomos, rule, other ruled, heteronomos, versus autonomos, self, nomos, auto, self, and nomos, rule, self-rule, no? And if people act on the basis of reason in accordance with the goodwill, then, whether you like it or not, autonomy will play a very important role. And if people practice these three formulations, you'd find the kingdom of ends, no? Where you are a king unto yourselves, where each one is a king unto themselves. And in this king unto themselves, you will realize you will realize and see the relationship between the person as legislator, but also as legislated. Two different things. Legislator and legislated. Legislator and legislated. Diba? So you make rules, you yourself will follow. But not only you yourself will follow, but the world but also the world will live with. Uh, Kasi nga, it's always based on reason, ano? It's based on uh, pure reason. Pagod na ako, 45 minutes na ako nagsasalita. Pero and I'd say apologies to it because I mean I still teach once in a while, but most of the time I don't na. Um, But let's look at utilitarianism. Here, you can begin with an activity, and then you can look at utilitarianism as a consequentialist ethical theory. Consequentialist because it looks at consequences. For Kant, it looks at motivation. No, that's why here you can create the distinction of the burning house dilemma, di ba? If there is a burning house and you had good intentions, you wanted to save the people there, you go inside, but you're careless, you hit a beam, everything collapses, everybody dies. You have good intentions, but negative consequences. On the other hand, uh, you can see a burning house, think that you can loot, brings out a box, and when you open the box, there are three children inside. No, bad intention, good consequences. Who is the good person? That's also very interesting to see students debate on it, argue on it, clarify also how they move forward based on it, di ba? Kasi kailangan din nating makita paano ba talaga anong gagawin natin, paano natin i-engage yung tao, ganun, di ba? So, consequentialist means even if I do bad, but in the end, if the consequences are good, then I've done good. Ganun. But here, the principle is utility, no? Utility gamit, no? Greatest good for the greatest number of people. So you need to take into consider who will benefit more, who benefits a lot, no? So for example, I can make an entire stadium happy if I just create a stadium like a Philippine Arena, for example. I can make thousands of people happy. But if I have the option between making an arena and making a hospital, which one will make more people happy? That's something to consider, di ba? Um, which is more beneficial, sorry. So now we can look at Bentham's felicific calculus because Bentham was the one who tried to quantify utility. And that's the felicific calculus. Meal, on the other hand, basically qualified it. Kaya nga, for meal, it's very important to distinguish pleasures. For Bentham, pleasures are the same. The pleasure you get from listening to poetry is the same from the pleasure you get from watching people kill each other. Very much the same. There's a common calculus, one measure, if you will. But Mill says no, 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 no. That's why he says I'm. It's better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. And there he creates a distinction between swinish pleasures, uh, and not so swinish pleasures, if you will. And human pleasures, no? It's better to be dissatisfied than to be satisfied. Busog na busog ka, pero baboy ka, di ba? As a pig, compared to hindi ka busog, pero tao ka. These are two different things. Of course, at this point, you can already create a distinction between utilitarianism and other ethical theories and frameworks of the ontology. I'm gonna pause this one a bit because my throat is already drying up and I have to drink water. But you should not feel it because you're just seated there and I'll pause it anyway. So just a minute, please. So I'm back, and I hope you didn't feel that at all. But at this point, you can already compare utilitarianism with other ethical theories or frameworks like the ontology, natural law, and the like. But in our textbook, because it's organized the other way around, then you can basically compare utilitarianism with the rest as you move forward, thereby producing a table of comparisons. Uh, And also, we need to take into consideration the pros and cons of utilitarianism, considering that this is the most dominant decision-making framework in the contemporary times due to its economic considerations and benefits. 'Di ba? In fact, there are so many cases of utilitarianism that has went bad. Of course, case in point is the Ford Pinto, the case of the Ford Pinto, how the engineers uh, simply assigned a number, an amount for human lives, something like that. Something for you to check and to consider. Of course, this is the Felicific calculus of Bentham. And as you know, the Felicific calculus is a very objective scale. No? In fact, you put scores here in fact, it's a Likert type scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, until 10. I forgot already how it looks like. But at the end of the day, the total is what you look at. And Bentham was the one who identified the criteria and the criteria of Bentham are intensity, duration, certainty, propinquity, fecundity, purity, and extent. So these are the things that, so you can choose an act and then ask them to evaluate them accordingly. Of course, no? Parang, you'd be surprised that people don't really rank things in the same way, no? And that's where you realize to a certain extent there's a quantitative side to ethical decisions, but a lot of it are also qualitative in nature, no? So what is the point of all of these things that we are teaching you? First, character will still be caught even if it is not systematically taught. So, as a teacher of ethics, um, do not forget all eyes are on you. And the students learn as you explain, as you clarify, as you move on, no? That's basically how you explain things. That is actually how you move forward, no? Here. So ang mabuting halimbawa ay higit na mabisa kaysa pahayag na dakila. No? And that's the reason why we're not just teaching concepts, we're teaching a way of life. And here you see your role as a teacher is also your vocation as a formator. Uh, so do you need to be in a high position to be a leader? Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. No, these are some of the principles that we can learn from. No, so maybe many of you are asking, so how can we effectively navigate ethical issues, especially in the context of our Filipino culture? We need to be able to integrate it, no? This is a very interesting program, the moral recovery program, no? In this text by Shahani, Senator Shahani, Alberto Romulo Maceda, you see very clearly the strengths of the Filipino character, no? Uh, and but you need to also understand that the very strengths of the Filipino character is also our very weakness. That's basically one of the key points of this study. Our very strengths are our very weaknesses. No? So, take into consideration pakikipagkapwa-tao, but also extreme personalism. You can also see family orientation versus extreme family-centeredness, di ba? The issues and the concerns on the impeachment of Sara Duterte, for example, has largely to do with a lot of these what so-called Filipino values, uh, which is both our strengths and our weaknesses. And the study on building a people, building a nation, a moral recovery program. That's how many years ago? Almost 87, 98, 2008, 2007, 2017, 30. Almost, almost 40 years in a few years' time, no? But see, it's still very relevant, no? Still very relevant until now. Okay? So may pa-activity pa. Uh, si, uh, but we'll skip that, no? So the didactic method, that's how normally we teach ethics. Didasken, which means to teach, no? So in the didactic method of teaching, the teacher gives instructions to the students, and the students are mostly passive listeners. It is the teacher-centered method and is content oriented. The content of the teacher is not questioned, but that's very different. That's why sometimes even when we teach ethics at Ateneo, we implement the prelectio lecture repetitio. Prelectio, this is a repetition in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the previous lesson. Lectio, the lecture today. So it's you connect it to the repetition and then you summarize it afterwards. No? Ganon. Very simple teaching techniques, but very important. Many people ignore these methods, but you should not. No, the prelectio, lectio, and repetitio. Benjamin Franklin did say, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, but involve me and then I learn." That's why in the online setup, we're no longer sage on the stage, no? No longer sage on the stage, but guide on the side. No? Nasa gilid na. Nagli-lead na lang, nag-guide na lang, no? So take note of the cone of learning by Edgar Dale, no? So 10% of what we read, we remember. 20% of what we hear, we remember. 30% of what we see, 50% of what we hear and see, 70% of what we say, 90% of what we both say and do. That's why immerse the class, no? Engage them, no? Make them learn, no? Make them learn from you also. Okay? So on facilitating, just a few notes on facilitating. Dapat matatapos na ako. Tatapusin ko lang yung slides din lang. Sorry. The slides that was given to me by my companions in this book, no? Teacher dominates or teacher directs. So, teacher is not the source of learning, no? Do not forget that. They want to learn, they'll Google. But we are controls in the learning environment. We control the learning environment. That's what we pay attention to. Okay? We control the learning environment. That's why educere means I lead, I draw, or take out, or forth, or away. No? Here, those are the things we need to pay attention to. Okay? Um, so never do a structured learning exercise. Do not give them exercises without processing it after. Or else you're just playing a game. No? Dapat if you give them a lesson, you have to process the lesson. No? Design the learning according to the point. No? Structured learning exercise. Design the structured learning exercise according to the point. Kaya nga, how do you design your syllabus? Look at your objectives, look at your outputs. The content in the middle is secondary, tertiary pa even. Kaya nga mas mahalaga, ano yung objectives, ano yung measure ng objectives. Those are the two things that you have to pay attention. The one in the middle, that can change, no? Some sample structured learning experience, meta cards, think, pair, share, pros, cons, and advantages or disadvantages, debate, one sentence circle narrative. So there are a lot, no? And these are educ context. So here, for example, mapping out Descartes' methodic doubt. No? So here, no, this is how you um, mental maps, di ba? Descartes, for example, or first meditations of Descartes. Meditaciones de prima filosofía. Um, use case study. For example, John Bulaong prepared this one also. No? Uh, or there are Duarte's 5 rules for presentation. Uh, we can watch this one, but it's in YouTube. So just look for it, and so that we spare ourselves of the time also for it. Uh, So what are the key takeaways from these samples? What are the higher order skills to sharpen? Perceptiveness, that's very important. No? Observing situations and reading persons, that's very important. Uh, so active listening, no? Highlighting, clarifying, summarizing, seeking consensus. Uh, so Stephen Covey would say, seek first to understand and then to be understood. No? Parang Saint Francis lang. No? It's not to love and not to be loved. Uh, Third, formulating questions. These are also higher order skills to sharpen. So you can formulate questions, focus attention, lead toward conclusions or insights, stimulate thinking. Uh, so perceptiveness, active listening, and formulating questions. These are the 3 things to look into. So teaching ethics versus creating an ethical classroom. This is also something that I'd like you to consider. So ulitin ko kasi naputol yung slide. Sabi dito sa slide, character will still be caught even if it's not systematically taught. Palitin na nga natin. Ayusin ko lang ha. There. Ay, hindi na na-share. Naka-share pa rin ba? Kung hindi na yata. So, character will still be caught even if it's not systematically taught. So, because teacher play a leadership role in a classroom, you need to consider 3 basic elements of leadership. 1, adequate self-knowledge for an effective self-possession. Self-knowledge. You should be aware. Second, personal growth that constantly adapts to the world. Third, a strong sense of mission because of a broad vision. Because teachers play a leadership role in the classroom, consider these 3 basic elements of leadership again. Adequate self-knowledge for an effective possession, personal growth that constantly adapts to the world, and a strong vision, sense of mission because of a broad mission. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that my sharing this morning will entice you to consider utilizing the textbook that we prepared for your students. This is a sample of the first edition. Don't look for this copy. This is old. The We have a new one where we also revise the cases, the activities, and the presentation of the content for your appreciation. I'm very sorry that I am not able to engage everyone at this point because of a prior commitment and change in schedule of the um, Rex team. But thank you very much. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to write an email at mjtcalano@gmail.com. No? That's Mike Juliet Tango Calano, Calano, at gmail.com. And hopefully, I'd be able to answer you if you're not yet my friend in Instagram or in Facebook. Muli, sa ganang amin mga ah, nagsulat ng librong ito na may pamagat na etika, si Dr. John Bulao, ako, si Dr. Albert Lagliva, Mr. Michael Nermariano at Dr. Jade Principe. Maraming salamat sa inyong pagtangkilik ng aming simpleng libro. Magandang umaga, magandang araw sa inyong lahat at marami pong salamat pong muli. Kung may katanungan po kayo, wag po kayong mag-abalang lumapit sa amin. Salamat po at magandang araw po muli.